Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippi, and welcome to the Minnesotan Sports Podcast. And we're going to be going over every game of the Week 10 action, just breaking down everything that happened. There was a lot of good games, especially if you're a Vikings fan. This was a great week for us. Of course, the Packers did end up getting a big win, but they're still 4-6, and the Saints are 3-7, and we're sitting pretty at the top of the NFC North. But we'll go over all that. But before I get started, I would just like to thank everyone for the reaction I got out of the breakdown. I did the raw reaction every week. If you aren't sure or you didn't know, every week after the Vikings game, like as soon as the game's over, I do a raw reaction to the end of the game. And in this one versus the Bills, I did like a full, breakdown of all my reactions to the last few plays. I was at Buffalo Wild Wings on Sunday with my dad watching the games. So I got some video of everyone's reactions, and everyone really liked that video. I got a lot of people looking at that one and liking it, so thank you guys for that. And if you like the rest of my content, I would welcome you to please subscribe and continue to grow the community. And I love being able to interact with more and more people as we go along, so I want to grow this as much as I possibly can. So if you do like what you're watching, make sure that you subscribe, make sure you follow my Instagram and my TikTok, which will be in the link in the description. So thank you all so much for all of your continued support. But with all that stuff out of the way, let's just go through every single one of these games, starting with the Falcons at the Panthers, which was a game that it really showed a lot about the Falcons. In this game, I was going into this game thinking, man, the Falcons were 5-6. They came off of a good win, 4-5, not 5-6, but 4-5 coming off of a good win. And I was thinking, if Mariota can play well, if this defense can continue to hold up, this offense has been playing pretty well. They're not going to make the playoffs, but I definitely think that they can start fighting and starting to prove themselves so that they can continue to build this team and get better for the future, and make a little bit of a statement towards the end of the season, like we're definitely better than last year. But all of a sudden now the Falcons are 1-4 in away games, which is never good. Mariota had a really rough game, and the Falcons defense gave up 25 points to the Panthers, and it's a shell of their former selves, trading away all their best players. So one of the worst offenses in the league was able to handle the Falcons defense pretty well. Neither of these teams are going to the playoffs, but it's very indicative of the fact that the Falcons are still further away from getting to that threshold of we're not as bad as we used to be. We can continue to start building on this, getting some better players in the offseason and fight for a playoff spot next year. But it seems like now they're a little bit short of that still. I need to see more of them before I think they can have more potential. Vikings at the Bills, I won't talk as much about this one as I could because I still did do that raw reaction already. But Vikings win 33-30 in overtime, and this is a game that proved that the Vikings were at least contenders to make it deep into the playoffs. They weren't just going to be first-round exits that, get the second seed because of all the good or easy teams they played, and then they get, they lose to the seventh seed, and it's a really embarrassing loss. I'd be very surprised at this point if the Vikings don't at least make it to the second round in the potential playoff situation the way they're playing now. Obviously, a lot could change, and us as Vikings fans know that we can never be comfortable. But this is the most comfortable with our team that I've been in a long time. I honestly feel more optimistic about this team than I did in 2017. I haven't felt as confident in a Vikings team right now since the 2009 season with Brett Favre, and that was the first couple years that I was invested in the Vikings. This was the best Vikings game in the regular season I've ever watched. If the Minneapolis Miracle play hadn't happened, or that game hadn't been the playoffs at all, this would have been my favorite Vikings game I've ever watched in my entire, 10? Oh, no, it's more than that. It's like 15 years of me being a Vikings fan. This is definitely my favorite regular season game for sure that I've watched. Delvin Cook was pretty silent this whole game, and he's going to have to get going in the future against teams that, it's going to be important to establish the run against teams, especially like the Eagles, that proved on Monday night, which I'll talk about, that they are having trouble stopping the run. So we're going to have to establish that, but Cook did break a huge run and completely change the momentum when he absolutely needed to. And that's been the mark of this team. Players have not played their absolute best football 4 quarters of the game, but each and every player was able to step up when they needed to step up. Same thing goes with Kirk Cousins. Both of the interceptions he threw in that first half were just awful. I mean, we're not going to sugarcoat that. Those were some awful interceptions he threw. But then he came back at the end of the game. He was 30 for 50, 357 yards, and a touchdown. And he led the team, obviously, a couple rough tries trying to get into the end zone at the end of the game and not able to do it. But those are building opportunities. I think the play calling would change in that situation. Also, there was 12 men on the field on that overtime drive. So a lot of things to build on still, obviously. Justin Jefferson made the best catch I've ever seen. I think OBJ is probably still a little bit better, but with what was on the line, his is the most memorable catch, I think. I think people will remember this catch more than OBJ's because it was on a 4th and 18. We would have lost the game without this catch. So Justin Jefferson proves that he is arguably the best wide receiver in the league, put up one of the best wide receiver performances we've seen in recent history in the regular season. And this is our difference-making guy. He needs to stay with this team for at least the majority of his career. If the Vikings let him walk away and sign with another team, it would be the biggest blunder in the history of this franchise. He's an incredibly special player, and he can change a game in an instant. And that's the exact kind of player we need in the playoffs, and it's a player that we haven't had for the longest time. I love Adam Thielen, but even Diggs was not able to change a game that quickly in the playoffs. So hopefully Justin Jefferson has not played a playoff game yet for an NFL team. Hopefully he can continue that in the playoffs because let's face it, at this point, we can't be too confident, but the Vikings are making the playoffs. But huge game there. Allen with a couple uncharacteristic mistakes. That's what I meant to say. And a big fumble to get the Vikings the lead late in the game. But it says just as much about the Vikings that they won as it does about the Bills that they lost. We can't take anything away from the Vikings just because the Bills did have kind of a rough game. We still went in there and we took care of business. We beat the Bills in their home stadium for the first time even in a really long time that anyone's done that. I think it's now been 2 seasons until this moment that the Bills had lost at home. And on top of that, we pulled off a 17-point comeback against the Bills, which is just incredible. So that's all I'll say about the Vikings, but this is a very special team, and maybe I'll do a little bit more of a breakdown of just how good this team can be sometime later in this week. But they play the Cowboys next week. It should be a really good game. Seahawks at the Buccaneers. This was a game that was played in Germany, and I did expect the Buccaneers to win this one just because, it's a big moment, playing in front of an international crowd the first time a game has been played in Germany, at least for a while. I can't remember if there's ever been a game in Germany, but I'm going to guess that there hasn't been. Either way, it's been a really long time, and I expected Tom Brady to rise to the occasion more than Geno Smith in this game. The Seahawks started out so flat. Geno Smith had maybe 100 yards, no TDs in the first half. They scored nothing in the first half, down 14-0, and they put up a really valiant comeback, scored 13 points in the fourth, but at the end of the day, the Buccaneers were just too much for them to handle. A great performance, some guys stepping up. It was a great next man up mentality for the Buccaneers, with Rachaad White taking a lot of the snaps after Leonard Fournette got hurt. And this team was really able to, build up and overcome the odds. They're now 5-5, and I do still expect them to come out of this NFC South division. I don't think there's any other team now. After I saw the way the Falcons played on Thursday night, I think the Buccaneers are still a pretty good lock to win their division, and they showed why they can still be a threat in the playoffs every given week because they have the seniority to make big plays in those big situations. Still, I have to see more of them before I think that they're up to the level that they've been in the recent years, but this was a good get-right game for the Buccaneers. Lions at Bears, I'm not going to say much about this game because these teams are both very irrelevant. Justin Fields had a game where he kind of came crashing back to earth. Or excuse me, I might have misread that. Yeah, he did have a game where he came crashing back down to earth. 167 yards. He did throw 2 touchdowns, but 1 interception. He did lead the team in rushing. But as far as the passing side, he didn't quite do enough to lead the team to victory. And then on the Lions side, they just did enough. Had a big pick six late in the game. I'm not going to say as much about this game because I didn't watch it quite as closely. But 2 irrelevant teams with a pretty good game in the early slot. Broncos at Titans. These 2 teams, this is possibly the most boring matchup ever because the Titans are 6-3, but you'd never know it because no one's talking about the Titans just simply because they have such a boring way of playing football. I mean, if this was my team, I wouldn't care. Obviously, you would always want your team to be more of an exciting team and a team that really, is able to play in a way like the Vikings play, where they have a lot of big plays. The Vikings are exciting also for the reason of they give you a heart attack every game and keep it close. But on the Tennessee side, they just don't do anything exciting. They run the ball down the other team's throats. They play good defense. And if that was my team, I wouldn't care. I just want my team to win. But if you're an NFL fan just wanting a good game, the Titans and Broncos are maybe the most boring 2 teams to watch. The Titans are easily the most boring good team out there. But surprisingly, Derrick Henry only had 19 carries for 53 yards in this game. And Nick Westbrook Ikeen, who I had never even heard of before this game, was the leading receiver in lieu of a lot of Tennessee wide receivers being hurt. So far this season, they've really struggled with that. So still coming out of this game 6-3, even after Derrick Henry, had kind of a so-so game. Definitely a very mediocre game for his standards. So I'm definitely a feel-good game for the Titans because usually they have to rely so much on the running back. So it was good for them to not have to rely on the running back all game long and still get the win. But it was, of course, against the Broncos. Chiefs and Jags. Chiefs come up with a 27-17 win. The Jaguars actually played them pretty tough and were able to keep it semi-close at certain points. It was 27-7 going into the fourth quarter, but it looked closer than it was. Patrick Mahomes with another vintage Patrick Mahomes game, 300-plus yards, four touchdowns, one uncharacteristic interception, but if you win, who cares? Trevor Lawrence actually had a decent game, but it's just clear that the Jaguars are still a couple seasons away from really contending. They've got some bright spots. Travis Etienne is looking pretty good rushing the ball. And Trevor Lawrence does seem like he's continuing to gain that confidence. He seems like one of those quarterbacks that's going to slowly develop and could be a Josh Allen type talent later on in his career, but he might need a year or 2 more. But so far, Jaguars still need a couple more years. Chiefs continue to be good, and now they take the number 1 seed with the Vikings beating the Bills. Browns and Dolphins. The Browns have completely imploded. They had a couple good games at the beginning of the season. Everyone thought they were going to be this really good team that could at least do enough to maybe get up to the level of being 500 still. And then, Deshaun Watson would come in week 12, 13, something like that, and he would just pull off, run the table the rest of the way, and the Browns would make the playoffs. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case because with the Browns playing a couple really good teams down the stretch now before Watson comes back, they could easily be 3-8 by the time he comes back, and by that point, they'd basically be out of playoff contention, which is great to see because I have to root against the Browns now that all that happened. The Dolphins, on the other hand, I feel like people kind of forgot about them for a second because of Tua's injury. They lost a couple games. All of a sudden, they're right around 500. But then, just like that, Tua comes back in. He's legitimately a candidate for MVP. I don't think he'll get it, but he has been playing phenomenally. Tyreek Hill continues to play like an absolute beast, and the Dolphins destroy the Browns. Giants and Texans. Giants. This was my upset of the week. I got it wrong, but I'm kind of impressed by how close I did get. I'm now 1-4 now for upset of the week, or maybe I'm 1-3. So that's unfortunate, but Saquon Barkley is back. I mean, it's pretty clear at this point. Saquon Barkley had a couple rough years. He's had injuries his entire career now, and it's been unfortunate to watch him try and struggle through that. But it's great to see this resurgence in him. And I'm honestly nervous for the Vikings to play the Giants strictly because of how good Barkley's been. The only concern is 35 carries for Barkley, and he accounted for a lot of their big games and big plays in this game. So the question is this going to be another Derrick Henry Tennessee Titans situation where they're going to just have to rely on Barkley every single game? Because Daniel Jones did throw two touchdowns, but didn't even throw for 200 yards. Still came away with the 24-16 victory, though, and they're 7-2, so what can you really say? They're also 4-1 at home, so home field advantage coming in to be a big factor here. But Saquon Barkley is going to be a major factor for this team, which is something that we haven't been able to see in a little while. So great to see him back. He's a phenomenal player and runner, and seems to be a really good guy too. Saints and Steelers, I'm not going to spend much time on this game because, like I love to see, because the Steelers, I'm sick of them winning. I've always been one of those fans that likes to see new teams win, and I get sick of dynasties and the same teams winning it over and over again. As well as I hate the Saints because of 2009, of course, and all the Bounty Gate and them beating us, and we were able to stick it to them a couple times in the last few years. But Saints 3-7, it's a beautiful sight. They lose 20-10 against the Steelers, which is really saying something. Najee Harris had a pretty good game. He averaged right around 5 yards per carry in this game, and all they had to do was really just run it down the Saints' throats. And the Saints only scored in the second quarter. All the other quarters, they were not able to do anything. And the Saints are looking pretty bad right now, and it makes you wonder, why is Andy Dalton still in? I mean, I think the only possibility is that they might part ways with Jameis at the end of the season, and they want to see if they can rely on Andy Dalton long term, because it's looking pretty clear now that the Saints are not going to make the playoffs. Or will they need to try and look elsewhere? I think they should try and draft someone in the first round here. They're gonna be a bad enough team where they could potentially get a top 10, or maybe even top 5 pick if they continue to tank. So they could end up getting a quarterback with that. I hope they don't. I hope they make a bad decision, but I would assume that they would do that. Colts at Raiders. The Colts win 25-20 with the Jeff Saturday led Colts, and they're all of a sudden 4-5-1. I don't expect them to win against any decent team because the Raiders are absolutely bad right now. Derek Carr with a decent game. Devontae Adams continues to be the reason why the Raiders even have a shot in a lot of these games. But at the end of the day, the Raiders just seem like a team that's kind of given up. It's just unfortunate to see them give up in this way, because it seems like they were kind of going playoffs or bust. They had a few rough games, and then it just continued to unravel. And now they've accepted that there's going to be another big rebuild on the way. The Raiders, thought they had a lot going with, it started with Antonio Brown a few years ago. They thought that they were going to really build something special. They made the playoffs just last year, so it's unfortunate for them. It seems like it's just all unraveling, and the Raiders are going to have to maybe, I don't even know what they're going to have to do. They might have to blow some more things up and try and get a new quarterback, because Derek Carr is near the end of his career. And he's not quite to the caliber that a team wants to be if they're going to start improving. Cowboys at Packers. This one was unfortunate for me to watch. Cowboys lose 28-31. And there was some controversial calls at the end of that game. A missed, PI. Of course, the Cowboys need to beat the Packers. Come on. The Packers have been playing so poorly. This was a huge breakout game, both for CeeDee Lamb, who had his first really good game of the season. Or I think he might have had a couple other good games, but this is definitely his breakout game of the season. So that was a big performance by him. It really bumped up his receiving totals. And then the other one is Christian Watson, 107 yards, 3 TDs. Of course, he only caught 4, so he seems to be like a big play target and a red zone target, but really anywhere else, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to trust him. And the Packers get it done, and all of a sudden, the second the Packers have a big win, everyone in the media is going crazy saying, oh, it's going to be another resurgence. The Packers are going to run the table again. They're going to be a really good team. The Cowboys are known to choke, and they had their first really cold weather game of the season where they had to go into a very hostile, cold environment. Dak Prescott threw 2 very costly interceptions. I mean, just because the Packers win one big game against a good team, doesn't mean they're all of a sudden back. Just don't forget about the rest of the Packers season you've seen so far besides this game. They aren't good. They're still not good. And we're going to see that against the Titans on Thursday Night Football. So that's my statement about that game. Cardinals at the Rams, and this was I don't even know if I want to say much about this game because both starting QBs were hurt. Cooper Kupp was also hurt in this game, but the Cardinals win 27-17, and the Rams are now in serious trouble. Like I said last week, I thought the Bengals would be the team that was going to be having the Super Bowl hangover, but it's clearly the Rams here. Matt Stafford is not playing like his old self. Obviously, like I said, he didn't play in this game, but still, that's the reason why they're 3-6. Still, the defense should not have allowed 27 points against the Cardinals, who were led by Colt McCoy and also just have not been able to score at that level for most of the season. So the Rams are looking rough. Cardinals get a much-needed win, and we'll have to see how the NFC West shakes out the rest of the season. But Seahawks love to see games like this where both teams are like kind of fighting to see who's the least worst, so to speak. Chargers and 49ers. Man, the Chargers, every single week you think, oh, but Herbert is so good, and the defense should be good in theory, and you look at the Chargers, they seem like a team that will be good, and then they just aren't. And of course, there's a lot of things going against the Chargers. They have been absolutely destroyed by injuries. But you can't score. You can't go the entire second half without scoring a point. I mean, come on, that's just really bad. And I get like Herbert had no wide receivers to throw to, but you got to get some points in the second half. I mean, that's just really embarrassing. 49ers, on the other hand, a good win for them. Elijah Mitchell actually led the 49ers in rushing yards for this game, which is surprising with McCaffrey. So we'll have to see how they continue to utilize Christian McCaffrey throughout the rest of the season. But the 49ers, I definitely think, are still a definite threat to try and overtake the Seahawks for this division. I think they're on their way up. It just depends on how well Jimmy Garoppolo plays and how well this defense holds up. So 49ers looking good. Chargers, I don't know if they have enough pieces left to be able to continue to contend. They're definitely out of the picture, I think, now in the AFC West. Finally, the piece de resistance of the week. The Commanders win 32-21 against the Eagles. Of course, it was a lot closer than that. It was 26-21 before the lateral that resulted in that touchdown in the end, to touchdown for the Commanders to win by more than that. But basically, it was 26-21. The Eagles were beat on the ground. Taylor Heineke threw for 200 yards and 1 interception, not a single touchdown. But the Commanders' defense, first of all, was phenomenal. and they were able to just absolutely suffocate the Eagles in terms of they just always had the ball. The Commanders, I didn't look at exactly how much more the Commanders had the ball, but I know it was a very large margin that they had it, and that's going to kill you as a team. If you have the ball for less than 35% of the game, you need to take advantage of every single opportunity, and they almost did, but Quez Watkins with a huge fumble, and the Eagles show that they are beatable. The way they can get beat is by the other team jumping on them early, controlling time of possession, and keeping it on the ground all game long. And that's exactly what the Commanders did. And now the Eagles are tied with the Vikings at 8-1 atop the NFC. So I think I'm going to end this one. I think at the end of all these now, after the Tuesday breakdown, I'm just going to go over the playoff picture just really quickly and just go over the team. So looking at the AFC right now, the teams that are out looking in are the Bengals 5-4 and the Los Angeles Chargers at 5-4. The Colts are technically 4-5, but past the Bengals, there's really no other teams that I believe have a chance. So we're looking at 9 teams fighting for these 7 spots right now as it stands, unless the Colts can pull off something incredible. And then the Patriots are at 7, Bills at 6, which I don't expect to last for long. The Jets 6-3 are at 5, and then the 4 division winners so far are the Ravens at 4, the Titans at 3, the Dolphins at 2, and the Chiefs are very firmly at 1 right now. The Bills are going to have to pick it up if they're going to have to try and get back into that 1 seed spot. On the NFC side, I'd say there's really only 8 teams that are battling for these 7 spots, and unless you think the Commanders are going to overtake the 49ers, it looks pretty clear that we have our 7 teams already that are most likely going to be in these playoffs. Of course, Chase Young can come back for the Commanders. You never know what can happen. But it's looking like the 49ers at 7, the Cowboys at 6, Giants at 5, Bucks at 4, Seahawks at 3, Vikings at 2, and Eagles at 1. It looks like those teams are just going to be kind of shaking around as the rest of the season goes on. But still possible that the Commanders can sneak in there. We'll have to see. That's what is so awesome about football is you never know when things are actually set. Teams can rise up from nowhere and teams can crash down to reality anytime. So it's going to be a great week 11, and I'll break that down and most likely get the video out on Friday. So I'll make a quick prediction that the Packers are going to get crushed by the Titans on Thursday Night Football. So I'm going to write that down in my early predictions for next week. But thanks so much for watching this one. Again, please like and subscribe if you like what I'm doing here. I really appreciate it. I'm going to continue to try and get better with my delivery and my production and all that. So please let me know if you have any suggestions, any comments, any concerns, or any ideas for something that I can talk about. I'd appreciate all those suggestions. So thanks so much, and I'll see you on the flip side.